The United Nations warns that unsustainable food production is costing societies trillions of dollars a year. The agency says governments are vastly underestimating the damage caused by agriculture on the climate and our own well-being. The UN's Food Agency has launched its flagship State of Food and Agriculture report. Now, it reveals that the hidden costs of agri-food systems, at least $10 trillion a year on the global economy due to carbon emissions and impacts on health. Now, the UN says that more than 70% of the costs are driven by unhealthy diets, high in ultra-processed foods, fats, as well as sugars. And this leads to obesity and non-communicable diseases, causing losses in productivity. 1/5 of the damage is from greenhouse gas emissions and nitrogen emissions, as well as land and water use. The greatest impact is generated by upper middle income and high income countries. However, when presented as a share of economic output, low income countries are proportionately hardest hit, the cost representing more than a quarter of their GDP. And this year's report provides a first attempt to measure agriculture's hidden damages in more than 150 countries. The UN urges governments to use true cost accounting to transform agri-food systems. And for more, Giles Gibson joins us. He's live from the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization headquarters that is in Rome. Giles, what are the key findings from the UN Food Agency's report?
Well, Dawn, this report looks at more than 150 countries and their agri-food systems. So what that means in layman's terms is every single step of the way from producing food on farms and in rivers and lakes all the way up to the supermarket, how we buy our food, and indeed the actual food that we decide to put on our plates and then put in our mouths. In terms of the $10 trillion worth of hidden costs that they've identified, a massive slice of those hidden costs are to do with unhealthy diets, because they of course lead to diseases like diabetes, which of course then have a cost in terms of healthcare systems having to treat many people with those diseases, and they also lead to lower productivity levels in economies all over the world. Another big slice, about 20% of these hidden costs are environmental, so that is basically the way we produce our food having an impact on the soil, on the rivers, on the lakes in different countries around the world. And the economists that produced this report basically put a number on the cost that we're seeing environmentally every single year. Now, as you were saying, really, if you look at this report, the impact on low-income countries is much, much higher when you're looking at the percentage of GDP versus high-income countries. And I found that very interesting because having looked at previous reports from the FAO, things like the Global Hunger Report, for example, we always see this trend of basically low-income countries bearing much more of the brunt of this than wealthier countries.
Well, Giles, we're talking about the transformation of food production systems here. They need to become more sustainable in the long term for the planet. But is that change going to happen, and how soon could it happen?
Well, just a few minutes ago, I was listening to the Director General of the FAO, Chu Dong-yu, at the launch event here at FAO HQ in Rome, and he talks about how he wanted this report to be a call to action, so for this to be a driver for change in terms of the way we produce food in different countries all over the world. He also said that he didn't want this organization, these reports, to be like a castle, so he was sort of saying that he didn't want to just sort of put these figures, this data out into the world and then sit back. He wanted to see the UN, different organizations like the FAO, really going out and talking to the private sector, which of course produces so much of the food that we eat in different countries around the world, and of course farmers themselves, who are actually right at the sort of coalface of all of this. This report admittedly is sort of slim in terms of solutions, in terms of what we can do to change our agri-food systems, but the FAO are saying that having spent this year sort of counting the costs, so looking into how much these hidden costs are impacting our societies, next year's report is going to be much more focused on how we can change things, how we can produce food simply in a better way.
Right, something of an uphill battle for sustainable food production then. Giles, thank you very much for that. Giles Gibson there reporting from us from the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization in Rome.